Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. Memorial Day Monday, solemn holiday here in the United States. A big thank you to all the military family, friends, as we think about you, those that gave the ultimate sacrifice. I'm Joe Saniego, and along with me, we have Ben Schneider from Grid Encore, which will be on later tonight, and NASCAR.info. And
My own
Kobe,
version of a double.
much not you don't have to hop onto helicopters or fly on airplanes,
That's
thankfully.
true. That is true.
But hopefully no weather, so the satellites and the internet keeps you on the air. And we have Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight. Don't have to do a double tonight, Kobe, but Wednesday, I know going to be a busy Wednesday because it's going to be Grid Tonight. And then we're going to start getting ready because, Ben, you're going to come out to Portland for the big race weekend. And of course, that is made possible by our Patreon investors. Calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. They've been mailed out some Grid Network stickers. If you want some Grid Network stickers, sign up for our Patreon. You'll get the Grid Network stickers, a thank you letter, and of course, you could do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat. By doing so, we'll thank you on the air if we catch it on there. If we don't see it on the air, we'll thank you the next time we go on the air. And $10 more will get you Grid Network stickers. And the simplest way, subscribe, hit the bell icon right here on YouTube, and visit our website, gridranking.com. We know Matthew Bro is working on the newest article for our website, recapping the Coca-Cola 600. Let's start off with recapping the biggest race of Memorial Day, and usually the biggest race that everyone's talking about, the Indianapolis 500, the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500. And for the first time in 22 years, we have a back-to-back winner of the Indianapolis 500. Josef Newgarden retook the lead from Pato O'Ward on the last lap on the outside of turn 3, a very bold move that allowed him to take Team Penske to win their 20th Indianapolis 500. Newgarden earned the race win from 2024, 2023, and he's now the 11th driver to do that with two wins. Ben, Kobe, let's talk about Josef Newgarden a little bit. 11th driver to win the Indianapolis 500 twice. First driver in 22 years to win it consecutively. But he had to make a big, bold move. Scott McLaughlin said it took some big something to make that move. Ben, did you have doubts when Josef Newgarden got the outside of Pato O'Ward and tried to make that move?
You know, if it was any other driver, I would have maybe had those doubts. But Josef Newgarden won this race last year. Very similar last lap pass. Obviously, different circumstances coming off of the red flag and everything. We'll get into that here in just a moment. But no, I mean, I as soon as I saw him duck to the outside, I had a feeling that he had a run. He was going to not lift going into turn 3. You can't lift it to the last lap of the 500, and he made the pass. And one of the most thrilling final laps that I can remember in Indy 500 history. I think our friend Matthew Owens said it was the 4th time that we've had a last lap pass for the 500, and Newgarden now has 2 of those in back-to-back years. So just incredible finish. You do feel for Pato O'Ward, and I know we'll get into him a little bit later here as well. But, just an incredible move by Josef Newgarden. The timing of it was absolutely perfect, and he's a 2-time Indianapolis 500 champion. And like I said in our chat yesterday, I believe now, some people might make a case for Michael Andretti. Michael Andretti never won this race, though. Some people might make a case for any of the answers, Al Sr., Al Jr., Bobby, take your pick. They were all great. But I think Josef Newgarden has a very strong case as the best American IndyCar driver we've seen since A.J. Foyt. He has been absolutely sensational at Indy the last 2 years. And like I said, going into last year's 500, it reminded me of Lionel Messi just winning the World Cup a few months before that. This was like the one major trophy in his sport that he hadn't won yet, but it was the biggest trophy of all, the Indianapolis 500. And now he's gone back to back. There's absolutely nothing left on his resume to check off. Everything from here is just gravy. And I can tell you he's going to get a lot of that over the next several years because this guy's not slowing down in the slightest. He won his 30th race yesterday. I have a feeling he's going to get to 40 easily, perhaps even 50. We'll see how high he can climb. But Team Penske, Josef Newgarden, congratulations on a great win. Absolutely sensational move to get the job done on the last lap yesterday.
If Joseph Newgarden keeps this up, it would not surprise me if he eventually joins the 4 times winners club at some point. I could definitely see him getting another Indy 500, maybe another 2, maybe he even gets 5, because Joseph Newgarden's still quite young and has many years ahead of him, many races to win. So it would not surprise me at all to see Joseph Newgarden continue to win Indy 500. He could even win three in a row next year. It would be absolutely amazing if Joseph Newgarden could achieve that feat. And it's crazy entering last year's Indy 500. Everyone was asking, when is Joseph Newgarden finally going to win this race? Because he's basically done everything there is to do in IndyCar, but win the biggest races. All he checked that off. Now he's won it twice, and that move on the outside that was very, very impressive. And I didn't know if it was going to work, but it seemed like those Team Penske cars were in another league in this race all month of May. He made it work. It was very bold. Like you said, Ben, his last lap of the Indy 500, you don't lift at all. It was crazy seeing all these drivers making moves on the outside at Indy. You don't usually see drivers, willing to take those big risks. But we saw, it wasn't just Newgarden. We saw drivers all throughout the field racing like it was the last lap all throughout the race. It was just a very intense, wild Indy 500, and that was definitely a really, really great finish. One of my favorite finishes of the Indy 500. Was just a really, really great race, and that finish was absolutely epic. And I'll tell you, I've been on YouTube watching this finish over and over multiple times in the last several hours.
And Kobe, just to follow up on that, I think a $440,000 pass on the last lap, right? Because there was that Warner bonus that had been accumulating ever since Elio went back-to-back in 2002. Nobody had done it since then. So a massive payday for Joseph Newgarden. But again, like I said, that's all gravy. There's no, they said it yesterday on the broadcast. Pato O'Ward's got the second biggest check with second most points, but that's no consolation to him at this point. All he's thinking about is what could I have done to keep Joseph Newgarden behind me on the last lap. And I'll just say what Al Unser Jr. said all those years ago. You just don't know what Indy means. It's absolutely incredible what Newgarden's accomplished here.
Yeah, that makes me wonder, what is Borg Warner going to do next year? How much money they're going to offer Joseph Newgarden for 3 in a row?
It's a good question.
It's going to be really interesting to see Newgarden, that move. We had seen it earlier in the race. I just thought he got this. He just had the car to beat the experience level over Pato O'Ward. No doubt. I thought it was, even if he couldn't not get it, I thought he would get it out of turn 4 and make it a drag race. What an amazing race. Behind the mic, the ones for all-time classic 500 is unbelievable. Every single one in the last decade has come down to the last 2 or 5 laps. I know we were just mentioning 4 last lap passes, and they all are fairly recent. Of course, Dan Weldon getting the win when J.R. Hildebrand crashed. Sam Hornish getting around Marco Andretti on the last lap, and now Joseph Newgarden the last 2 years. 108 run-ins of this race, and all of those within the last 20 so years. That's just amazing. Of course, last year, that last lap pass was very controversial. Leave pit road, come take the green and white flag, finish the race. Ben, does this win by Joseph Newgarden silence the doubters and skeptics about how he won last year?
Well, unfortunately, I did see some of the conspiracy theorists because, of course, Penske owns the track and they had the penalty at St. Pete earlier this year. So, I mean, if you guys want to run wild with that, keep that off my timeline here, keep that off my feed. I think Penske got penalized very harshly for that, and they made it very clear that those issues are no longer a problem with their cars and everything. So unless more comes out that we don't know about, and they're doing some shenanigans again, then I can eat my words there. But I don't want to talk about that today. I want to talk about the great job that Joseph Newgarden did. And again, I won't reveal who it was, but I did have a like-minded race fan in a group chat I'm in say he's legit in my eyes now, because he felt very similarly to the way I felt last year about how the race went down. And I want to be unequivocally clear. I have my problems with how last year's finish played out and how the red flag was thrown there at the end. But none of that was on Joseph Newgarden. It was a situation where the winner of the race was not in doubt. We can talk about how the last couple of laps were officiated, whether or not they should have thrown the red, what happened on that second to last restart there. There was no doubt who won last year's race. Joseph Newgarden objectively made the pass and crossed the finish line first. it was not a situation like we had in 2002 where Paul Tracy will still tell you to this day that he feels like he won that race. We all know Josef Newgarden won last year. So, yeah, there were some doubters or skeptics that thought maybe he got a little bit of assistance with the red flag there at the end last year. But, again, if there were any doubters left, I hope that they've been silenced by this, because there was absolutely nothing to doubt here yesterday with what we saw. Josef Newgarden, again, like we just talked about, it was the absolutely perfect move, perfectly timed, perfectly executed. And he got him back-to-back wins in the Indianapolis 500. I think that should be the story, not the controversy that we had at the start of the year, not the controversy with how he won it last year with the red flag. We should be talking about him as a back-to-back Indy 500 champion. I hope that's where the conversation goes from here.
Yeah, Josef Newgarden won this race fair and square, no doubt. What we saw in this race was his talent on full display, especially on the final lap. I totally agree with you, Ben. I believe that this should be the main storyline instead of all the controversy that's happened. And I think it's safe to say, based on the crowd reaction, Josef Newgarden's reputation, which obviously taking a hit after St. Pete, has definitely been restored, and maybe the drivers will start talking to him again. I remember after the scandal came out, then a lot of the drivers, they kind of distanced themselves from him, and Josef, he really took a lot of heat for his team, and now it really seems like that reputation starting to be restored, and maybe he can really put this all behind him, because there was no push to pass in this race on the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Oval, so you can't say that was it. But I think Team Penske just executed this entire month perfectly, and despite losing some key members of their team, it seemed like they had the next man up mentality, and they were able to put a lot of already good people in those new roles, and they excelled. I know Josef Newgarden's pit on time and stand. You had the guy who leads the Porsche Penske Motorsport sports car program. And this is something out of his element, because he's used to dealing with sports cars, not Indy cars. So I thought he did a really great job, filling in for Tim Cindric up there and others on Joseph's team. So I really believe that everything we saw from Josef Newgarden in the month of May will silence any doubters. I think he won this race fair and square, and I think his talent should be admired, because it was such a spectacular drive by him.
Spectacular drive, and the caliber of driver Josef Newgarden is. This is, I think, that Indy 500 win a lot of drivers dream of, making a last lap pass. He's going to go down as one of the best, I think, in IndyCar, without a doubt. The championships he has, now 2 Indy 500s, and this is the one that everyone will be talking about. History books will show him as a 2-time winner. I do believe, like you said, Ben, the officiating, everything from 2023, people could now forget about that and talk about this one, because like you said, Kobe, how many times have we been watching the end of this race over and over just because it was that exciting? A couple of comments in the chat room. Chrome Diesel, hi all, how's everyone doing? Well, it's Memorial Day Monday and 7 races in the span of 5 series. I think some of us are still napping. Joshua Birch had a long day, a couple others taking it easy. Still trying to be in a good mood after this point and the Coke 600. Coke 600, we'll be talking about that a little bit. And the 500 yesterday, all-time classic. We'll go across, Ben, starting with you. Do you think that's one of the all-time classics up there with 1992 and the other phenomenal years that we've seen, great finishes?
I mean, the only thing that could have made it better is if Newgarden had made that pass coming to the line on the front stretch than going into turn 3 on the back. But I mean, that's just nitpicking at this point. I mean, it was a fantastic race, and I am so glad. I was just hoping and praying the last 10 laps. I was like, I am okay with any of these top 5 or top 6 guys winning the race. Let's just please go green. Let's not have any of the controversy that we had last year with the late caution that forces a red flag and a late restart and how fans are going to be divided on that. Let's just please go green. And they did. And I'm glad they did, because I think that was in doubt with how the first half of this race went. I mean, the guys were really on edge and really aggressive early, but not just the finish, I think, but the entire race. Thank goodness we got it in. Thank goodness the weather held off with that second storm cell coming in. It's unfortunate what happened at Charlotte, and like Chrome Diesel mentioned, we'll get into that in just a moment. But I mean, yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I think the best possible outcome, best possible scenario, given what we were dealt with in the morning with the weather.
I put this up there. Oh, go ahead, Kobe.
You can go ahead, Joe. You said we're going across.
No problem. I put this up there with 2011 when Dan Weldon. That was such a surprise, shock moment. 1992, Alonso Jr. getting that win over Scott Goodyear. I know a lot of folks were rooting for Scott as he was closing in, but it left you on the edge of your seat. This is, I think, up there with those two as some of the best ones.
Yeah, for sure. I also put it up there as, one of the all-time classes. During the month of May, I usually go on YouTube and, watch some of the old Indy 500s that I really like. And I'm definitely going to put this one on my list. I thought the racing was, like I say, very, 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 very intense, wild, and kind of crazy at times. Drivers kept racing like, any lap could be the last lap. And I guess that's understandable since, we had a storm system that was supposed to arrive to the track. And thankfully, it didn't show up at all before the end of the race. But a lot of drivers, thought, we could have been racing to halfway, or after halfway could end at any lap. So they wanted to put themselves in the position. I think that also contributed to the intensity that we saw. And it was just a really, really good race. I definitely have to tip my hat to IndyCar, for working very hard to put on an excellent show, because we really didn't think the show would happen at all. And Matthew Owen said that IndyCar needs to be commended for their work yesterday too. The track was dried ultra quickly. Great work with the fans, getting them in and out, and then got all 500 miles in. Great work. Totally agree with you, Matthew. Really, really happy that IndyCar was able to, basically keep their whole pre-race program intact, and get the show on the road. And you say, thank goodness we're not all watching the 500 now in USA. Yeah, if 500 been ran out, they would have been moved to USA Network, which is, not necessarily the best thing for, arguably the most important race in the world.
Yeah, it would have been a bummer to watch the race today. Overall, though, one driver that has to feel bummed out from yesterday is, of course, the second place finisher, Pato O'Ward. One of the big things, as Newgarden was celebrating, he jumped into the crowd again. He was showing the thrill of victory. On the opposite side of pit wall, you saw the agony of defeat. Pato O'Ward, 2 corners short from winning the 108th run of the Indianapolis 500. He was emotional. For the Award fans, interview on NBC had to be agonizing to see Pato after finishing second place. 2 corners short, one of the displays of agony of defeats. I think you could really say this is what Indy means. Overall, the full range of emotions on full display at Indianapolis. Kobe. We saw Mark Martin, NASCAR Hall of Famer, on Twitter X call him a class act for that interview. Is this a humble and mature Pato O'Ward we'll see going forward?
Yeah, it really seems like Pato O'Ward has matured a lot, and especially in his racecraft. That's where I've seen a lot of his maturity. I know in the last few years, we've been talking about Pato all month, especially on our practice shows, how Pato, he's been close to winning this race before, but unfortunately just hasn't worked out for him. And I'm starting to ask myself, what does Pato O'Ward have to do to finally win the Indianapolis 500? And like you say, Joe, looking at his expression yesterday, you could see how much this meant to him. He really, really wanted to win this race, and I believe he thought he had it made, but unfortunately, Joseph Newgarden just had that bigger run and, got around him. Maybe Pato made his moves too soon. Maybe he should have, hung behind Newgarden, going down the backstretch to try to get the slingshot around him on heading into turn 3. But then again, you don't know what's going to happen behind you. For all we know, Pato could have stayed behind Newgarden. Then the caution come out. Then the race could have been over. So I guess he felt like he had to make the move then. But as we've seen, in the recent Indy 500s, the last move typically comes down the backstretch heading into turn 3, and then the driver behind usually can't get back to him. But it was a super unfortunate circumstance for him. I thought Pato was finally going to win the race, and he did too, and looked like he was very emotional. Looked like he had tears in his eyes as well. So many people on his team consoled him, let him know it's going to be all right. And I believe at some point Pato O'Ward is finally going to get his Indy 500 victory. I think it's only a matter of time, but before it happens, because he's already been too close, from battling Marcus Ericsson and lifting to battling Ericsson again the following year, and crashing out of the race, being too aggressive. He's had that Indy 500 win in sight. I think it's just a matter of when he gets it, not a matter of if.
I don't think you can blame a driver within the last few laps or so for making the move when you have the opportunity. I remember in 2015, I thought for sure Montoya had made his move on his teammate Will Power at the time at Penske too early because I think he made it with like 4 laps to go or something. I thought for sure at some point Power was going to have a run to get back around him again. Obviously, that didn't happen, and Montoya won his second 500 in 2015. I think back a few years earlier, I think Scott Goodyear was in the ABC booth saying Takuma Sato should have waited and made the pass going into turn 3, which is what Newgarden did this year, not tried what Pato O'Ward did this year and make it going into turn 1, although O'Ward got a stronger run and made the pass by the start finish line. So maybe not quite the exact situation there. But the point being, I think, when Kobe, to your point about a caution coming out, you never know when the race might be over in those closing laps. You never know when you might get another run like that to make your move. I think you have to take it. I think Rossi did something similar on Pagenaud in the closing laps, and knowing that the Hondas were a little bit down on horsepower that year to the Chevys, he had an opportunity with a few laps to go, and he took it because he didn't know if it was going to come again, and ultimately Pagenaud got him back. But that's just the nature of how this race is nowadays, how powerful that slipstream is. I think you can't blame Pato O'Ward for making the move when he did. I know some people are going to say, maybe he should have backed off and tried to get a run coming out of 2 again. But, again, maybe Newgarden would have tucked right back in and beat him to the line. I mean, you just never know how this race is going to play out. Very bittersweet day for McLaren, on all fronts. You had Alexander Rossi. I don't know. Did Rossi run out of fuel? Because I was shocked that Dixon had passed him. I thought he had a pretty good gap in 3rd place coming to the line, but Dixon obviously got him and Rossi fell back to 4th. And I know he was frustrated, but he had to go into fuel conservation mode. Obviously, Kyle Larson had the speeding penalty. Callum Ilott, his race was thrown a wrench into his plans even at the start of the race, just trying to get off the grid. And then obviously Pato O'Ward, coming up just 1 spot short. But, Mark Martin said it all. An absolute class act, a great interview on his part. And Kobe, in total agreement with you. Like I said in our chat yesterday, I'm reminded of when Tony Kanaan crashed out and took out Sarah Fisher in 2008, and Marty Reed said, "I'm telling you, that guy one day is going to win this race." That's how I feel about Pato O'Ward right now. I think it's just a matter of time. You give him a few more years. He keeps driving like this, being at the front at the end. He's going to win this race one day.
I believe it took Josef Newgarden 11 years to win the Indy 500. So
11 or 12, I think. Yeah.
A long time. Pato O'Ward. I know there's some drivers that have come close and they never again able to get that win. Pato has done this more than once. I'm confident, unless the McLaren team just absolutely drops the ball in the future years. But the way they are, I think that he could easily be an Indy 500 champ one of these years. Behind him, the camera shot of Pato on pit road with his helmet on his shoulders, slumped, and his head down and his arms will be forever and ever used by networks and social media. The power of Indianapolis, and it did take Newgarden 12 years to get the first, 12 months to get his second.
I think it took Tony Kanaan 12 years to get his first as well. So
another driver,
yeah. That's just the nature of this race. Sometimes, you can be one of the best drivers in the grid. Sometimes it takes you a long time to break through. But, again, to Kobe's point, I think Newgarden's gotten over that initial hump. I think Newgarden could get to 4 now easily. He's overcome that initial hump and, has gone back to back now. But who knows? Pato O'Ward, I think, is going to have at least one of his own 2 one day. But, I thought the same about J.R. Hildebrand after he came so close his rookie year, and he's still in pursuit of his first. I hope he gets a ride to come back next year because I think he certainly deserves it. But yeah, I mean, it's just, again, it's the emotions of Indianapolis. It goes both ways, from the highest of highs for the winner to the lowest of lows, and so bittersweet for O'Ward coming so close in second.
Yeah, and this was just O'Ward's 5th Indianapolis 500 that he's competed in. So he still has many more ahead of him. Hopefully it won't take as long as 11, 12 Indy 500s to get it done, but I think he's definitely going to be in the mix for the next handful of years to come.
Well, for the next handful of years, I think as to the comment from behind the mic, we talk a little bit about how series, their marketing, their promotion events. For Indianapolis 500, you have all the footage of Josef Newgarden celebrating, getting this win this year, the fans' excitement. I hope they incorporate paddle award because that is truly the agony defeat. This is what Indianapolis does. You finish second place. You were 2 corners away, but there is no celebration that, oh, we had a wonderful day. We finished second. The car wasn't that great, but we overcame. No, it's, I'm devastated. I just came 2 corners short of winning the biggest race of the year of your career when you win it. That is what I think could really demonstrate how Indianapolis means so much to all these drivers. One driver that wants to be back again for the Indianapolis 500 and had an eventful Indy 500, Kyle Larson, Paddle Awards teammate. He started in row 2, but on the first restart of the race, he made a mistake, lost many positions when shifting up, had an issue, ended up in third gear somehow. He was able to climb back and spend most of the day in the top 10, but then a pit road speeding penalty during green flag pit stops with less than 70 laps to go. That ended his top 10 finish run. On a later caution, they tried to give him a crazy fuel number to hit to not pit again, but that was just not working out. And then Kyle Larson went on to finish 18th. Of course, with the rain delay and everything, he missed the start for the Coca-Cola 600, made it to the track, never got to run a single lap in his Cup Series car since the race was called off early. So, Ben, I got to ask you, how would you essentially rank Larson's performance at Indy compared to the most recent driver that was able to complete the double, Kurt Busch?
I know Kyle's disappointed, and obviously you can't control the weather. I know he's disappointed that he made a mistake coming into the pits, but like it was referenced on the broadcast, Scott Dixon made that mistake a couple of years ago as well. I mean, and he's one of the best of the best we've ever seen in this sport. So it's a very easy mistake to make for Kyle Larson to come here as an Indy 500 rookie. As immensely talented as he is, he had a lot to learn. I think he did an admirable job getting up to speed all month. And like you said, Joe, I hope that he exercises that option for a second year to come back and try this again. But the biggest takeaway that I had from yesterday and seeing, especially as Larson made that mistake, on the restart and kind of got shuffled back, ultimately finished in 18th place. I did not appreciate Kurt Busch nearly enough 10 years ago to finish in 6th place on his first attempts and ultimately only attempt to doing the double. It's a shame he never got a chance to come back and try this race again. But, the job that he did was absolutely sensational. And I hate that he lost an engine later that night in Charlotte because I think he would have had a shot to emulate his then boss at the time, actually, Tony Stewart, and become the second driver to actually finish all 1,100 miles. But Kurt did an amazing job, and I have no doubt that Kyle would be capable of a similar result, maybe even a little bit better if he comes back next year. So hopefully we get to see that.
Yeah, I'll totally echo everything you just said, Ben. I also think we didn't appreciate what Kurt Busch did enough. That was very impressive what Kurt Busch did an entire decade ago. I know Kyle didn't get to finish that he wanted in this race after that penalty, but I think for his first Indy 500 in month of May, Kyle did reasonably well. I was very impressed with everything he was able to do at Indy, and never really put a wheel wrong at all. I know he got chewed up on one of the early restarts. When the car got stuck in one of the gears, lost a lot of position, but he had a fast enough car, was able to make up a lot of those positions and get back up in the top 10 before the penalty derailed his day. Like you said, I know he's very disappointed in how everything played out yesterday, but you can't control the weather and all of that. But all in all, I think it was a very impressive performance. And I think with one Indy 500 in his belt, he come back next year or whenever, I think he'll have a better idea of how this race will go, and we could potentially see him contending for a win. And I also want to bring up something I saw on Racer.com yesterday. I was really glad that Racer decided to repost the late Robin Miller's article. His final article, basically Robin Miller's final wish was to see Kyle Larson run the Indianapolis 500 because Robin Miller believed, that Larson, is those once in a generational talents that if it can be seen, on a global stage at Indianapolis, that would be so great for motorsports. And I'm really happy that the late Robin Miller's wish got to come true. We got to see Kyle Larson compete in the Indianapolis 500 and turn a lot of heads in this race. The finish doesn't say the whole story.
Yeah, the finish doesn't say the whole story. It's one of those deals where I feel he did a great race. He made the right moves when he needed to. He did not make a mistake. We saw a lot of rookies have an issue. Of course, a lot of those rookies lack the oval experience compared to Kyle Larson, but Kyle Larson made a mistake on that restart where that could have easily ruined his race, derailed him. He showed the ultimate professional driving skills he has and experience. He just worked his way towards the front. Locking up onto pit road, I think that was a mistake. As mentioned, various drivers with experience levels in IndyCar have done that mistake. We don't have a whole lot of green flag pit stops on ovals anymore like we used to when we had much more ovals. Overall, I think Kyle Larson, his performance was very good. I think a lot of people, they anticipate he was going to go out there and possibly lead laps. I thought he ran solidly in the top 10, and that was just, hey, gain the experience because this is part of a 2-year deal. One of the big things, though, Kyle Larson did put out this tweet this morning, in which he said, "What I thought could be one of the best days of my life quickly turned one of the most disappointing ones I've ever experienced. I hated for Rick Hendrick, Jeff Gordon, HAG, Hendrick Motorsports, everyone a part of the 5 team, everyone on the 17 IndyCar for speeding, my family, my friends, my family, and the documentary crew that have been following me along this journey for the past 8 months. So much time, money, and effort went into this experience, and it just kills me to have it all ended the way it did. I feel like I've let down so many people. We know all along weather could throw a wrench into things, but seeing it come to reality is a horrible feeling. Up until Sunday, it was truly one of the greatest experiences of my life. I can't describe how appreciative I am of everyone supporting of me to live out a dream. I hope it's not the last opportunity I have to try to double, but if it is, I guess it was memorable. Thank you, everyone at Aero McLaren, Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and all the competitors for making me feel welcome. Ready to get back on the track now and get refocused on winning a second championship for our team, Kyle Larson. Ben, he's heard it. We could tell he's disappointed, probably feeling like he let down a lot of folks, as he said. Do you anticipate Kyle Larson will be back at Indy next year? And would Rick Hendrick be flexible again to allow Larson to miss part of the Coca-Cola 600?
Well, hopefully he won't have to be flexible because we'll have the weather cooperate. I mean, I get that Larson's frustrated. I don't know why he's feeling like he let so many people down. I thought he did an admirable job, like I just mentioned. And I hope that he gets a chance to come back and do it again. But yeah, I mean, it's incredibly frustrating how the weather played out. I'm glad we got the 500 in. I know a lot of fans, myself included, were frustrated with how the 600 ended, and I got to tell you, I can't help but have the flashbacks to 2007 Milwaukee in the Busch Series. I thought for a second there, the timing it was going to be perfect. We were going to go back racing, and maybe Kyle Larson was going to make Justin Allgaier a Cup Series winner. Allgaier did a phenomenal job holding down the fort of the number 5 team for Kyle, and it's unfortunate that we couldn't get that race restarted and seeing if Kyle could have come back through the field and done what he's done so many times in the NASCAR Cup Series stock car and perhaps put the 5 in victory lane. But yeah, it's frustrating for sure. And, I mean, I would imagine that NASCAR is going to give him a waiver. I mean, Rick Hendrick must know something that we don't. And I got to say, I know some fans were saying, well, this is his day job. This is, what he signed up for. He knew that this was a risk. He shouldn't get a waiver. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion there, but I just couldn't disagree more. I think that, NASCAR, it's frequently said that they hand these waivers out like candy. I can only think of a couple of times. I think Grant Enfinger in the Truck Series is the only one that comes to mind for me immediately of somebody not getting a waiver that requested one for missing a race. So I think that, the waivers are there. The rule is in place, rather, to keep drivers from intentionally skipping races or resting, if they've already got a playoff berth wrapped up. That was not the deal here. Kyle Larson fully intended to run this race, and it's just unfortunate that the weather played a role in not allowing him to get to Charlotte on time. But, again, I would imagine that Rick Hendrick would not have allowed him to stay at Indianapolis if they didn't know that a waiver was at least incredibly likely, if not, if they hadn't been made aware of it already, but NASCAR was going to give them one. So, given how this year played out, I would imagine, and Rick even said, in the lead up, it would be very difficult to pull Kyle from the 500. If the weather didn't cooperate, I would imagine that this only motivates them even more to want to try to make this deal happen again next year, to come back next year and attempt this again. Because it's unfortunate that, it was the first time we had somebody try him a double in 10 years. It's the first time we had weather impact the 517. Just the timing of it couldn't have been worse for Kyle's part. But again, I'm not sure why he feels like he let everybody down, because there's nothing he could have done to control the weather. And he did a great job getting up to speed and doing the best he could with the circumstances that he was given. So I hope and pray that they're able to put this deal together again next year. And I can't imagine that there would be anybody at that team that isn't more motivated to come back and give it another shot in 25.
I'd love to see Kyle Larson get another shot next year. I 100% agree with you that this was out of Kyle Larson's hands. The weather just unfortunately messed up a lot of people's plans, not just Kyle Larson, but I mean, for everyone that was trying to catch, to report, view both races, you have to make a decision, all sorts of things. And if there's one thing I'm curious about, Rick Hendrick, he was at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Jeff Gordon was at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I have a sense that maybe as they experience the pageantry, everything that is the Indianapolis 500, it hits different than the Brickyard 400 by a long, long ways. If maybe, okay, Kyle, you have to stay, you have to do this race. I don't fault Kyle Larson. I think it's just a competitive nature. Everyone, he felt like he may have let down, but really just a victim of the circumstances with the weather, everything just not cooperating. I think really just demonstrates how challenging it takes logistically to put this all together for any driver that makes the attempt for the double. Comment in the chat room. NASCAR handed many waivers outside for medical reasons, plus winning championships is meaningless because it's one race.
I mean, people know how I feel about our playoff system. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's completely meaningless. I don't think it holds as much weight as a full season championship would have back in the day. But, again, I mean, we already have such a convoluted bracket system, and, winning trumps everything. And you can have a 40th place finish, which is basically skipping a race, because you only get 1 point, right? I mean, you might as well have not even shown up. I think the points that Kyle lost today or yesterday rather, it's not something that's insurmountable given the system that we have now. I think if he gets a waiver, he'll be fine. And, I think he should get a waiver, to be quite honest with you, because, look at how we crown our champions nowadays anyway. I mean, what's the harm in allowing him to have a waiver for missing this one race when we have a Cup champion in Kyle Busch to miss 11 races in 2015 and still was allowed to win a title. Now, granted, he actually got hurt competing in a race car, so different circumstances there, I'm sure some would argue, but I think it's the same idea. When you have a bracket system like this with multiple resets, everybody's drawn back together again, I think there's no reason not to allow Kyle Larson to continue to be part of a championship fight.
Yeah, Kyle Larson, he's going to be definitely fighting for the second championship. That waiver, I think, is a no-brainer. It will be really interesting to see. And, of course, if anything, we'll report that on Grid tonight, but I doubt we'll have anything shocking. One thing that was shocking and disastrous was the day for Honda at the Indianapolis 500. Honda Power Cars finishing 27th through 33rd place. 3 for mechanical reasons. And then you have 3 Honda drivers crashed out on lap 1, turn 1. Now, we've heard the rumors that Honda might be leaving IndyCar after communications have shown Honda not exactly happy with IndyCar before the season started. The Indy 500 is the biggest race of the season, biggest payday, marketing, everything. And Honda could have easily had a much better weekend if one of their drivers were able to get the win. But it was all Chevrolets up towards the front, just essentially leading almost most of the laps. Ben, starting with you, when it comes to this weekend, how bad it was for Honda, could that be a determining factor if Honda decides to stay or leave IndyCar?
I feel like it could go either way, and I hesitate to give an answer here because I'm in no way qualified, I feel like, to comment on, the business decisions that are being made. I have no connections to anybody at Honda. I have no idea what talks they're in with the series or anything. I can just go off of what I would do in this situation. But if I were somebody at Honda, related to, the team that puts these IndyCar programs and these engines together, it was not a good day yesterday. We'll say that, plain and obvious right at the start. But I would like to think that maybe it could have the opposite effect. It might motivate them even more to say, well, we don't want to go out like this. Let's give this another shot and renew for another handful of years to come back and take the fight to Chevrolet. So again, I think you could look at it from that path, but you could also very easily look at this and say, well, maybe the writing's on the wall. Maybe this is a sign that, we should redirect and refocus our efforts somewhere else and, pull out of the sport, which again, I think would be devastating. I don't know if Chevrolet has the bandwidth to supply, 33 engines plus anybody else that wants to make an attempt and, might have to qualify their way into the field. I think going back to one engine would be absolutely devastating for the series, not just from a logistical perspective on Chevy's part, but from a perspective, because then you become even closer to what we had for many years with the spec series with only Honda supplying the engines like we had from whatever it was, 05 or 06 to 2011 before Chevy came back and Lotus tried to come in as well. Again, it's a very tough position for IndyCar to be in because I know they wanted to be opposite. They want to bring a third partner in, but they got to focus on hanging on to one of their two existing partners first and foremost. And this weekend, again, with how it went for Honda, it could go either way. But I think there are certainly going to be some in the Honda camp that are thinking to themselves, well, this wasn't good. Maybe that's just a sign that maybe our time here is up.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say whether or not this will be a determining factor, whether Honda stays or goes. But I do think that the issue that Honda has with the IndyCar, goes way deeper than what we saw in the race. So I think was, all the issues that have been going on for the last, handful of months or even last couple of years or so. That's probably going to be, the determining factor of whether or not we get to keep Honda in the NTT IndyCar series. And when I saw, those Honda motors, kept continued to blow, I was wondering, is this going to be like 2017 all over again? Are we going to see just multiple Honda engines blow up? But thankfully, once we got those, few Honda engines that had issues, we didn't really have any more issues for the rest of the day. And also, since this current IndyCar engine is about to hit the end of its life cycle, I'm wondering, was this Honda, just trying to, crank it up at the very end of this engine cycle, try to get as much power as they could out of the car, although the Honda seemed to be down on power compared to the Chevrolet. As we saw in qualifying, the Chevy engines kept misfiring when the drivers kept trying to go through the gears. You lose power and end up killing some qualifying runs as we saw the previous week. So I'm wondering if the issues with Honda were related. It's the end of the engine life cycle. We're going to be moving to the hybrids very soon, and we're just trying to get as much as we can out of the engine, and we kind of went too far with some of them.
Yeah, it seems like after some of those early engine failures, the rest of the Honda drivers were able to go on, keep racing. Of course, for Honda, while it was a lousy weekend, Alex Palou, you probably thought it was a little bit of a disappointing day. But on paper, though, another strong finish. Palou has finished in the top 5 of every race this year, and his streak from top 10 finishes continues dating back from Portland. What an amazing run this guy has from Portland 2022 all the way up. After this race, he said he'll be more happy thinking about the point stands and keeping the points lead, which here we are Monday morning. He's still the points leader, so he's probably feeling a little bit better. Just wishes he was in victory lane at Indianapolis. Kobe, now that the Indy 500 is behind us all, is the full focus now on the championship? And who are the biggest threat to Alex Palou?
Yeah, I think without question, with the Indy 500 in the rearview mirror, now we're going to be focused on the championship and who can win it. And it looks like Alex Palou, is in the driver's seat to win another championship. But, obviously we have a lot of races left to go. Way too soon to say that Palou is definitely going to be the champion. But I definitely think he's one of the favorites right now. And it's still crazy after all of these races. Palou's top 10 streak is still alive. Continue to be Mr. Consistency and leading the point standings over his Chip Ganassi racing teammate Scott Dixon right now. I think Scott Dixon is probably his biggest threat for the championship. And if Will Power can put this Indy 500 crash behind him, I think he could get up there as well. Pato Ward still has, a little bit of work to do, but he can certainly close the gap throughout the season. Colton Herta's there as well, and Scott McLaughlin, even Joseph Newgarden is under the picture. All of those drivers are going to have to do some work. But where the championship stands right now, I think the three front runners are going to be obviously Palou, Scott Dixon, and Will Power. Scott Dixon's going to be hungry to try to get to championship number 7. Even Jimmy Johnson said yesterday on the broadcast that he's cheering for Scott Dixon to get his 7th championship so he can be 07 time as well.
Well, the first thing I have to comment on is, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, I didn't recall. I thought the NBC coverage was very well done. The booth was great, as it usually is. I don't recall a single ad read or promo for Detroit next week. Did you guys see any of that?
No, I didn't.
Don't believe
I mean, again, that just goes back to the whole marketing. I mean, this is the biggest race of the year, and we have a race next week. Obviously, it's a very different type of track, but it just drives me crazy. I wish that more people would know that this series exists on a larger scale rather than just this one day a year. So I wanted to comment on that because, as we're talking about right now, there is a points championship, and there are races later in June and throughout the rest of the summer into the fall, and it's incredibly frustrating that those are not marketed better than they are. But getting back to the championship in terms of where Palou is right now, I think absolutely all the focus, obviously at the start of the year, and even looking ahead to next year's 500, it obviously is a massive attention grabber for everybody in the series, but as for 2024, now the 500's behind us. Of course, all the focus turns to the championship now, especially if you're chasing down Alex Palou, who again is on this incredible run of top 5 and top 10 finishes that I think is making it clear that he is once again the championship favorite. Obviously, Scott Dixon's going to be more motivated than ever to get his 7th, and Josef Newgarden's coming off of a lot of momentum right now. We'll see if he can ride that into a strong summer and close the points gap. But again, I think that it's Alex Palou's championship to lose with how he's been running right now. He just looks unstoppable no matter what kind of track we go to, whether it's the Indianapolis Motor Speedway where he always has strong runs or, obviously the road and street courses. He just never seems to have a bad day. And if that's the case, it's very difficult to see anybody taking the fight to him over the course of a full season to beat him on points to win a championship.
Yeah, and we were talking about Alex Palou's streak of top 10s. Also wanted to add in, I forgot to say that in my answer, was Santino Ferrucci finishing the top 10 for his 6th straight Indianapolis 500. So his streak is still alive, which is very, very impressive as well. So next year, Santino will try to make it 7 years on a road, finishing in the top 10. And Ben also wanted to bounce off of your point about, the marketing aspect of thing about not seeing a single ad about racing in the streets of Detroit. I saw a statistic over the weekend saying that 70% of Indy 500 fans don't watch another race for the rest of the year, and that's a major problem, like a big problem.
Kobe, I saw Doug Bowles put that number out there a couple of weeks ago, and I'm honestly shocked it's not higher. I would have thought it was closer to 80%, maybe even 85%, because I know that so many people come to this race. I mean, we made the point on Grid tonight. There were more people at the 500 yesterday than watched, what was it, Long Beach, I think, that only had 307,000 viewers on USA for your second most prestigious race of the year. More people were at your first than watched your second. That is a problem. So the fact that it's only 70%, I'm happy it's not higher, but I'm a little surprised it's not higher because they're like we just talked about. Where was the marketing for Detroit? Where was the marketing for our season finale? I guess the only other race where we're on anywhere close to a similar type track. We have more ovals coming, but they're all shorter ovals where we're not using this exact aero kit. I mean, just the marketing needs to step it up, and we need to take a greater advantage of what we have here this one day a year where we have so many eyeballs on this sport, and let them know and tell them, hey, make sure you tune in next week because these guys will be right back at it again doing something completely different, and maybe you'll enjoy that too, and maybe you become a fan of the entire series rather than just this one race a year.
Sort of reminds me of the dilemma in thoroughbred horse racing. Everybody, the Kentucky Derby, they tune in, they watch it.
Oh.
If I don't remember which one is after the Kentucky Derby for the Triple Crown, where it's a Belmont or Preakness,
and then Belmont.
And then Belmont.
Yeah, but that's the problem. It's the exact same problem, Joe. Like you mentioned, horse racing is a year-round sport, but I mean, the horse racing fans, they've got to hope that the Kentucky Derby winner wins the Preakness, because if that doesn't happen, then nobody even cares about the Belmont, because nobody's going for a Triple Crown. So they have the exact same sort of dilemma. They have to market their sport to their fans that watch the Derby every year and get them to become true horse racing fans rather than just Kentucky Derby fans. It's the exact same deal. It's a great point.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. It was like, if that Kentucky Derby winner does not enter the Belmont with the chance of winning the Triple Crown, nobody cares about the Belmont. Nobody really, the viewership numbers just sink. For IndyCar, we have the Indy 500. How is it? Even if we kept 10% of the viewers or even 5% of the fans, a minimum, to come back to Detroit. I know for the longest time it was Milwaukee after the Indy 500. If there was some way to retain that and show there's a championship online, this isn't just IndyCar because they raced the Indy 500. This is IndyCar, a series of races 17 times across the United States. I do at least remember at one point when Colton heard a crash, they said Colton needs to get back in their car. This is just one race out of 17. I don't know how far that's going to go and getting people to realize, oh, they have more races. Maybe I'll look it up, but I don't recall a single promo or anything. We'll see you all next weekend for Detroit. Not once, which I think is a missed opportunity, especially for NBC and their networks that follow the IndyCar series. So it'll be something IndyCar, hopefully NBC, especially starting next year, if it is NBC or another channel, they could work on improving those numbers so we have that higher retention rate race after race. And we do have a comment in the chat room. While IndyCar has a great racing product, the lack of marketing efforts outside of the Indy 500. I think that's the big thing. The Indy 500, it could tell itself such a huge story of just that race alone. How could we get that story to go around for each and every race? We know there's a driver stories. We know other series do a great job at it. IndyCar thing needs to figure that out. Definitely, I know fans, they're all saying it too. Encourage everyone in the chat room. If you were in the IndyCar, how would you change things to get that high retention rate of fans from the Indianapolis 500? With the Indianapolis 500, 108 years of running this race. One of the big things we saw, the race was plagued with caution flags in the first half of the race. Before we got to lap 30, we had 3 different cautions. One of the big things, of course, lap 1, turn 1. This has happened on occasional occurrences in the Indianapolis 500. One of the most infamous ones, Scott Sharp on the pole, entered turn 1, lap 1, crashed out. Race was over. We know the original concern was the weather. It looked like rain was going to come back around 6:30 to 7 p.m. So potentially everyone was racing towards lap 101 instead of 200. Thankfully, the rain never returned. However, restarts was very aggressive throughout the day. We saw aggressive blocking throughout the race, including Scott Dixon's not getting a penalty for pushing Ryan Hunter-Reay into the grass. The commentators thought it was going to be a sure penalty coming. No penalty. Ryan Hunter-Reay frustrated, confused by Scott Dixon's action and lack of action from race control. Now, he said he felt there was a lack of respect in the Indianapolis 500. And earlier we talked about the 4 last lap passes in the Indy 500. 2006 was Hornish, 2011 with Dan Weld, and the last 2 years with Josef Newgarden. Ben, do you feel the Indy 500 has been evolving over the last couple of years to the point where safety might be becoming a bit of a concern now?
Yes and no. I mean, I feel like the cars are the safest they've ever been. We fixed the suspension issue after James Hinchcliffe's accident in 2015. We obviously now have cockpit protection with the aero screen after we lost Justin Wilson also in 2015. So I think, 9 or 10 years ago, there was certainly a lot of concerns when it came to safety in the IndyCar series. And not to say that there aren't now. Obviously, this is when you're going 240 miles an hour, inches apart from each other, inches apart from, the safer barriers and even concrete walls still. I mean, I cannot believe that we're in 2024 and the place that birthed the safer barrier in IMS does not have safer barriers all the way around the corners and down the straightaway and everything. and on the inside walls everywhere. But that's a discussion for another day, I suppose, in terms of just that one track. But, I think in terms of this race, obviously safety is always going to be a concern, but I do feel like the cars are the safest they've ever been. And I don't know, maybe the younger generation of drivers that really hasn't had to grow up worrying about safety in the same way that Scott Dixon and Ryan Hunter-Reay and other veterans have, although they were the ones that were involved in that controversy, like you just mentioned, Joe. So maybe there's something to be said for that there as well. But, I think maybe the younger drivers in particular, they do feel a little bit more invincible than drivers of yesterday did. And maybe that has something to do with it as well. So I think that we should give IndyCar a lot of credit. The cars are the safest that they've ever been because of the innovations that we've seen just in the last 10 years alone. But I do think, maybe one of the side effects to that is that you have drivers being a little bit more aggressive and making moves that perhaps 20 years ago they wouldn't have, because, safety's maybe a little bit further in the back of their minds now than it would have been 20, 30 years ago when we were still implementing some of these things here. So again, I could see it. I could see an argument in terms of both a yes or no answer for this question. But I think that, we always have to remember that safety is a major part of this sport, and give IMS and IndyCar credit for the steps that they've taken. But, again, the younger generation might have a different perspective than the older one.
Yeah, I think anytime you're going 220, 230 miles per hour, obviously safety is going to be a concern because that's really fast. But like we were saying, and Indy cars worked so hard over years to make these cars the safest they've ever been. And when the car is as safe as it is now, drivers are willing to take more risks because they feel like, if something happened, that they're more than likely going to be okay. And like back in the day, you wouldn't see drivers taking the bigger risks, because if the drivers back in the day took some of the risks that some of the drivers are taking today, then it would not end well for those drivers back then. But yeah, the aggression in the Indy 500 has definitely picked up, and I think this is the most aggressive Indy 500 I've ever seen from a driving perspective, I guess, of my lifetime. I know we've seen a lot of aggressive moves in the past, but the intensity was unmatched and very, very, very intense. It was just really crazy seeing some of the moves that were being made. I know we talked about Paddle Ward earlier. I don't know if you got since you guys were watching the broadcast, that was a crazy save he made. I believe it was the exit of turn 2 when and Lee Diffie said, working those ninja hands, and it was just unbelievable because most drivers, it just goes to show the talent that Paddle Ward has. A lot of drivers, that would have been racing and crashed. Paddle basically, he almost crashed that like 3 or 4 times in one corner. I still have no idea how he held on to that. It was just a very impressive move there. And given some of the aggressive moves we saw on the backstretch, I saw so many cars, clipping the grass with the left side. I'm thinking someone's going to hit the grass and go right back up into the track, and it's not going to be pretty. I'm surprised, that Ryan Hunter-Reay was the only one who actually had a major issue there in the grass, because a lot of drivers, especially in the restarts, were cutting it very close, since, passing was a lot easier in this race than we thought, but it was still difficult to a certain degree. So I guess the reason why we saw so much aggression on the restarts, you have to make hay and get what you can on the restart, because once it gets spread out, it becomes harder to move through the field. So I think that's another reason why you saw drivers racing so aggressive. And as I mentioned earlier, you had the weather situation, didn't know if the storms were going to show up, so you wanted to be in the right place at the right time. And usually in any racing series coming off a rain delay, it's typically pretty crazy out there.
The weather situation. Also, too, one of the things, fuel saving. We saw, again, fuel saving was a big factor. So you were very aggressive, but then as everyone got single filed, fuel saving, you didn't exactly want to lead. It was just one of those deals where I feel so many factors played into this race being so wild. Last year was crazy, too, even though we went, I believe, the first 90 laps before the first caution in 2023, a long green flag run. I just think so many factors just made into this becoming an issue. And overall, while the racing has gotten aggressive, yes, the cars are safer. The drivers, they are on another level. You mentioned about Paddle Ward. On that last lap, if you watch when Josef Newgarden made the pass, you could see Paddle Ward his car starts going up the hill, exiting turn 3, and I thought he was going to hit the wall intentionally. He did not, but you could see where his car was drifted up after Newgarden got around him, the dirty air. My big concern has always been wheel-to-wheel contact. We don't have the covers no more. a car get airborne. We've seen that occur various years. I'm hopeful at least the driver keep it reasonable when it comes to aggression, but this is the biggest race, and we know careers are made or broken right here in Indianapolis and the Indianapolis 500. We spent a full hour covering the Indianapolis 500, 108th run. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for the Indy 500. We still have, like we mentioned, and the tracker displays more racing to discuss. Let's switch over to it with Formula One.
All right, thank you, Joe. While Marco Andretti came up short in his 19th attempt to break the Andretti curse, Charles Leclerc did break a curse of his own at his home race at Monaco on Sunday. From pole position to a flawless restart, he dominated the Formula One race, the Monaco Grand Prix, securing a popular and emotional win. At times, it looked like Oscar Piastri was all over the back of Leclerc to put pressure on him, hope for a mistake, but that ultimately never happened. Leclerc won his first victory since Australia in 2022, and a very popular one at that. Joe, does this win signal that Leclerc can now be a reliable contender for the win the rest of the season here?
I'm going to say yes, because Charles Leclerc, he did everything right this weekend at Monaco. Max Verstappen, his absence there was because of a mistake in qualifying, a mistake he made in qualifying. He still had a lot of pressure from the McLaren teams. We've seen they are on another level. They are ready to go out there and contend for wins. Charles Leclerc, picture perfect, gets the job done. He gets the win. He is now closing in on Max Verstappen for the points championship. I do see this as a signal that he is becoming a reliable contender. And we've talked about this with other series too. When you get that win or you go break a long winless streak, it sort of gives you that renewed confidence. The Ferrari team, they're looking great again. I'm hopeful the Ferrari team could keep this up so we do have a championship battle between Verstappen and Leclerc, and hopefully more action up front, and it's not just a dominance of Max Verstappen.
Yeah, Joe, it's kind of been a surprising turn of this season so far in Formula One. I thought Max Verstappen would run away with the championship just like he did last year, but it seems like the Ferrari has really cut down the gap to Red Bull quite a bit. I still think Red Bull has the upper hand, but they definitely don't have the advantage that they have last year, and I think that's really good for F1. I don't know if I can say that Leclerc is going to be a reliable contender for the win. I still think Max is going to be the favorite to win most weeks, but I definitely think, if Max has an off weekend like he did this weekend, Monaco, Leclerc and Ferrari can definitely pounce. And I guess everything that team principal, Fergie Versure has been doing behind the scenes, we're finally starting to see the effects of that. And this Ferrari team is looking as strong as I've seen them in a long time. If they could just get their strategy game right, in most races, I think that'd be perfectly fine. Got Lewis Hamilton coming in next year, and based on what we've seen from Ferrari this year, if I'm Lewis, in that Mercedes, that's not where they used to be, I'll be really happy if I was Lewis Hamilton to see Ferrari where they are right now, because it looks like Ferrari is definitely on the up right now, and maybe they can potentially challenge Red Bull in more races later on this season.
Well, I think our own Nicole said in our chat yesterday, I trust Leclerc. I don't trust Ferrari. I think that's probably where I am at this point. A great drive by Leclerc yesterday, but can Ferrari give him the reliability that he needs to take the fight to Max Verstappen? I think it's the question that's going to be on everybody's minds, because we know Leclerc has the talent, but this was his first win in 2 seasons here pretty much. So, he needs a car to get the job done as well. Now let's talk about Max Verstappen. He was stuck in 6th place, unable to progress up through the field. Part of Monaco's nature, I believe, the first time that the top 10 who started the race in that order actually finished in the same order as well. So we know Monaco's always very difficult to overtake, but this year perhaps more so than any. So Kobe, had Max been up front within the first couple of spots or so, do you still believe Leclerc would have won, or do you think that the win was all decided pretty much on Saturday in qualifying due to Max being so far down the grid?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think the race was decided based on the results of qualifying, and it just and yeah, Ben, you brought up that crazy stat for the first time in F1 history, a top 10 finish, and is that same place that it started. It just shows you the difficult nature of overtaking in Monaco. Very rare to see passing on this track. You have to be very bold and execute it perfectly, or otherwise it's not going to work out and you're going to end up retired from this race. I still think if Max, qualified just a few positions higher, Leclerc probably still going to win this race. I think maybe if Max had qualified second, he would have had a chance, but I think anything third on back, it would have been very difficult for him to try to get through. As we saw, there was basically no passing at all in this race, and there was really nothing that Max Verstappen could do. So absolutely, the race was decided on Saturday.
Saturday decided to race. If Max Verstappen was on the front row, I think at the end with that crash, it would have been hard for anything to change still with the lack of strategy with the pit stops. This was just one of those deals where the passing is so hard. We saw the pressure from Oscar Piastri at times. We know if there was pit stops, you had to be much more aware of what you're doing when it comes to the strategy, the tire management, and where your teammate was running for the overcut, undercut. At the end of the day, this was just one of those deals where with Max's absence, we still saw some battling. But at the end, just the nature of Monaco, Max, as great as he is, as great as his car is, that mistake ruined it where stuck in sixth place. He said he was bored behind the wheel. I can't imagine how frustrating that had to be to just cruise laps around knowing that unless there was a crash, you're not going to get around anybody.
I think Bottas overtook Sargent. I did see that. I'm trying to think if there was another overtake the entire race. Maybe there was, and TV just didn't show it, or I missed it. But yeah, overtaking certainly a rarity here at Monaco, and we'll get into that even more a little bit later. But before we do, let's talk about the opening lap of the race. We saw a very violent crash between Kevin Magnussen and Sergio Perez on lap 1. At first, everyone saw it as Magnussen's fault, but the replay showed some additional context and angles. Perez appears to be looking in the mirror and still squeezing Magnussen. Ultimately, no further action was the decision made by the F1 stewards. I'm sure Kevin Magnussen is very glad about that, given how close he is to the 12 penalty points that would trigger a race ban. So, Joe, was this the right call, or do you still feel like after having a little more than 24 hours to digest what we saw that Kevin Magnussen was at fault here?
It has taken all 24 hours to think about this because initially it looked like a slam dunk case where, okay, you wouldn't anticipate Magnussen to be there. You were focusing on Nico Hulkenberg on the left side, and then this crash occurred, especially this early that we just started the race. But then as that replay was showing, it looked like Sergio Perez was aware that Magnussen was there. We know how the drivers race each other, whereas Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, they're going to race you to the point where either you lift off or you're both going to crash. I started wondering, is Sergio Perez assume Kevin Magnussen will lift off because he knows Kevin Magnussen, his situation with the points, and unfortunately neither driver lifted off and they ended up crashed out? That's what I started thinking. So overall, I don't believe this is 100% Magnussen's fault. Can someone say this was very too early to make this kind of aggressive move? Potentially. But let's be honest, we know, as we just discussed, Monaco is so hard for passing. This is your best opportunity. You might as well go for it. It's just unfortunate it didn't work out. This is a racing deal where I feel like fans are going to be split on. It's just one of those deals where I think considering he's facing a race ban, probably race control was just a little bit more, okay, seeing everything, we're just going to say it was a racing incident, no further investigation.
Yeah, Joe, I tend to agree with you, especially on that last part. I think maybe this was the stewards, trying to cut Magnussen a break, saying like, we really don't want to give you these 2 penalty points, and give you a race ban, so we're gonna let this one slide for now. But yeah, at first, it was, once we saw it happen, we're obviously like, yep, based on Kevin Magnussen's antics we've seen from him so far this season, like that was probably his fault. But once we saw more angles about it, like maybe it was 50% his fault, maybe 50% Perez. Maybe that's why they decided to call it a racing incident, but who knows? But all in all, I think Magnussen needs to be counting his blessings right now that he didn't get called on this and get 2 additional penalty points, because then Ollie Behrman would have been getting ready to get a race in the Haas car. So I think, there's something for Magnussen to put behind him and move forward at the next race when we go to Canadian Grand Prix. And speaking of the Canadian Grand Prix, I like to bring up an interesting story circulating in Formula One media today. It's been reported by several outlets, including Sky Sports F1, that the incident we saw yesterday between the Alpine drivers, Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, it could cause some issues within the team, and the Alpine is potentially looking at imposing like a self-imposed one race ban for Esteban Ocon for the incident. So I think that would be really crazy if Esteban Ocon gets suspended over that incident with Pierre Gasly. And we already know the relationship between Gasly and Ocon. They were childhood friends turned foes, and they haven't liked each other at all for years. So it's a very intense rivalry between those two. I think it would be really wild if they decided to, ban Ocon for racing. I guess put in their reserve driver Jack Doohan.
I was just going to ask who would be on that short list or who the reserve driver would be, but I guess there you go. That's the answer. Yeah, I mean, we'll certainly keep an eye on that. That would certainly be wild if Ocon gets a race ban or gets replaced entirely, or who knows what's going to happen. I'm just seeing the story come in at the same time as everybody else here, but yeah, something else to consider, because again, I'm sure. The first lap, all the action in Monaco happened. The first lap, it seemed, was, obviously the incident that caused the red flag and signs locking up and going off course, but obviously got his place back because of the red flag rules and then that deal with the Alpine teammates. So we'll keep an eye on that, Kobe. I'm sure you'll have more for us on Grid tonight if and when that story continues to develop. But let's talk about the race here as a whole and the current state of the Monaco Grand Prix. Obviously, the red flag rules in Formula One allowed a bunch of teams to change their tires to meet the rule of using two different compounds under dry conditions. So that meant really nobody had to pit again as long as they could make the tires last to the end of the race. So we saw everybody saving tires, riding around. I know Max Verstappen was saying he should have brought a pillow because he was so bored. Lance Stroll pitted to try to challenge for more positions, but a punctured tire ruined his day anyway. So, Kobe, there's always a lot of discourse around this race and what Monaco has turned into here in 2024. It's known as a track with little overtaking. We saw little to no strategy after the red flag. What do you think can be done, if anything, to improve the racing here at Monaco? Or is this a situation where we just need to accept that this track is more on the circuit or more on the calendar as a historic circuit for historic purposes, and it's not really about the racing, it's about the glamour and prestige of Monaco?
As well as we've been saying for many years now, these F1 cars have gotten so big and they've outgrown the streets of Monaco. I think the only thing that they can really do to improve the race and this potentially change the layout, but then you'll have all the purists out there, flipping out and saying, no, you can't do that. That would hurt tradition and all of that. But I honestly think that could probably be the only way that they can improve the race in Monaco, or maybe in future F1 regulation, maybe try to make the cars a little bit smaller, but I don't think that's the direction that they want to go in. But overall, I don't really think there's much more you can do besides changing the circuit or trying to make the car smaller in a future regulations package. But overall, I know there's been a lot of debate between, the fans saying, like, should we continue to go to Monaco, like for the prestige and principality of this historical circuit, and it's definitely quite a debate, or we just need to accept that this is Monaco is. If they're not going to improve, if they're not going to adjust the car for this circuit, or any other things like changing the track, I think we probably just need to accept that this is just Monaco. We're just going to be here for the prestige, the history, and we just need to accept that that this is just going to be a procession type of race every single year.
For the longest time, I feel Monaco has just been kept for the prestige, and Formula One was happy with that. But that can only go so far, because if this is just becoming the annual response to Monaco, what do you thought of the race? It was procession. This year, next level, since we had no pit stops, the strategy was gone. I'll be open if F1 said, hey, we do a lot for Monaco. It's not exactly on the level. No track similar to Monaco can get on the F1 calendar nowadays. Monaco is sort of exempt. Maybe they need to look into a different package for Monaco. One of the things, of course, they were on the softest tires spectrum. Could they use even more softer tires specifically made to Monaco, as Blue Moon 95 suggested? Potentially, but that's going to be something that a rule exemption for Monaco needs to be made, because we can only do so much for Monaco to accommodate it on the calendar. When it comes to the race, the prestige, it can only go so far. I think it gets to the point. This is why I kept thinking about Las Vegas. It's the new Liberty Media F1. More thinking Las Vegas could be the bigger and better version of Monaco. You have the casino, more accessible, bigger crowd, a little bit easier compared to Monaco, where such a small principality, you try to accommodate so many people, but it is just the sport has grown and changed to a level where it's just so hard and the racing's not delivering. I think you have to start looking at some changes, whether it's at the circuit. I know I've heard a couple years ago the idea of using another neighborhood to make almost like a Joker lap type, but I feel that'd be too radically different to try to encourage passing. We know they pave the road every year. I'm just always surprised they still have that one bump after the casino. If they get rid of that, maybe that can encourage more pass. I don't think anybody's going to be too upset that, oh, you lost the tradition because the bump is gone. We need some changes in Monaco because I do feel the calls for change are going to keep growing and growing, and we do nothing but keep saying this is our biggest event of the year, even though the best part of it is qualifying because, well, in this year, the top 10 didn't change at all. It could happen again if you have a repeat situation and you did no changes or adjustment for 2025.
Go back and forth on this because to your point, Joe, I think qualifying for Monaco is arguably the best qualifying session of a year. It's absolutely stunning to see those images of how close those drivers are getting towards the barriers and, seeing the cars dance through the streets of Monaco, I think is absolutely sensational to watch and really separates the good from the great. And that's why Charles Leclerc totally deserves what he experienced yesterday, winning his home race finally, the Monaco Grand Prix. But again, then you get to Sunday and it's really, unless you have an engine failure or somebody makes a mistake, it's, pretty much a foregone conclusion. It's kind of a parade. And those things are less likely to happen when you're not pushing the car to the limits because of the tire compounds and, what happened on the opening lap, kind of dictating the strategy for everybody. So, again, to the point about the tires, I think it was 2018 where we had super softs, ultra softs, and hyper softs. So the hardest tire compound was called super soft. I mean, maybe that's something we need to consider bringing back, like a super ultra hyper soft compound lineup for these tires to maybe encourage more pit stops. But, again, to Kobe's point as well, I think the only thing you can do is look at future regulations and try to make the cars smaller than they are now and similar in size to what they used to be. I think that would still only go so far because of how fast the cars are now. And I think that you probably shouldn't be thinking about your regulations based on just one race out of 24 on the calendar. So it's a difficult situation. I see both sides of it. I understand the people that think this race doesn't hold as much prestige or value as it used to. But again, I also think you have to honor tradition. You have to honor the prestige and history of this track and this circuit and this country and what it means to Formula One. So I see it both ways, but I do think that if there is anything we can do to make a change here and try to make the racing just even a little bit better, it's worth considering here.
Yeah, but and I wanted to add one more point before we move on to the next thing.
Sure.
And I know we've talked about this in previous shows discussing F1, but I think the red flag situation, I think that needs to change as well because, I know it was obviously going to be a parade anywhere around Monaco, but you don't see this in any other racing series in the world where you can change tires, during the red flag. And then you basically, nobody had to come in again and you just rode around and there was no strategy. And it took away what little bit of strategy we could have had in this race. And also think that hurt as well because when you're just riding around, just preserving tires until the end, nobody's going to be pushing. And, there's obviously going to be very, very little room for overtaken. So I think not just at Monaco, just all F1 races in general, I think it's really crazy that you can service the car during the red flag and it just takes away all the strategy.
Yeah, totally agree. That's something that I've never understood. We saw it come up in the 2021 championship fight. I think even Jimmy Johnson was tweeting and saying it was mind blown that you could change tires under red because obviously you can't do it in NASCAR or any other series that I can think of. So, that's another rule that I think would maybe, not just for Monaco, obviously, but for everywhere, I'd like to see F1 revisit that. Let's talk about the championship. Obviously, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but Charles Leclerc now 31 points behind Max Verstappen in the driver's standings. Ferrari 24 behind Red Bull in the constructors. So the constructors actually a little bit closer than the drivers now. Of course, Checo Perez didn't add to Red Bull's total with his lap one incident, but Fred Vasseur and Leclerc both took a swim after the race win. This looks like a promising Ferrari squad. I know they were celebrating like crazy. Finally, Leclerc winning the Monaco Grand Prix. And Ferrari also the first team to have both of their drivers stand on the top step of the podium win races this season as well. So, Joe, does Red Bull need to regroup and start looking into making some changes here to ensure that they can continue to hold their championship advantage, or do you think it's still a little bit early for them to be concerned and may still have the upper hand overall?
This is a tricky question because it would be a different story if Max Verstappen had gotten the pole. He would be easily, I think, the winner or at least second place, depending on how the start went, but most likely the winner. And we'll be talking more about Max Verstappen, 2 in a row, dominating. Here we go again. But when you look at the constructors, it is really closing down to a much closer level where with Sergio Perez not getting it done on Sunday, Carlos Sainz still getting points. This might become something where Red Bull, I do think, have to at least start saying, okay, we don't exactly have the big edge like we used to, but you don't need to go out there and just start throwing everything at what do we need to do. Just look at the data, look at the results, see where we can improve the car for Max, for Sergio Perez too. Perez, it almost seems like a pattern where it just seems certain races, if he could qualify up towards the front and have an easy day, stay in the top 3, he's going to do so. But if he has a poor qualifying session, it just becomes a challenge. And I think maybe that's where the pressure comes to him. What happened in Monaco, a racing incident. So overall for Red Bull, I think they got to approach this as keep doing what you've been doing because it has been working. It's still working. If Max did not mess up in qualifying, he'll be up there towards the front. But you got to at least do some minor changes looking into where we could just improve here and there to ensure we could continue our march towards more championships in the constructors and the drivers.
Yeah, if anything, I think Red Bull, just needs to regroup a little and move forward to the next one. And I know Max still, finished in the points. Obviously, 6th place isn't where he wants to be finishing. He wants to be either winning the race or finishing second because the Red Bull car is still the best car on the grid. But I just think that Red Bull is just going through a interesting little time period right now because with Adrian Newey leaving, plus a lot of other things that have been happening behind the scene with Christian Horner. It really seems like the team has been in turmoil internally, and I'm starting to wonder, could that be affected? What's happening on the racetrack now is obviously, we're in Red Bull, we don't really know for sure, but I wouldn't be concerned at all right now if I was Red Bull. If this continues for the next several races, and we see a drop off in performance, throughout the team, then I would get concerned. But I think for now, maybe just a small regrouping is what's needed.
All right, we will leave it there. And next Formula One race is the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal, and we will have that on June 9th and preview it for you right here on the Grid Network. Now let's move on to the third and final race of the greatest day in motorsports. In the minds of most people, obviously we have Formula E and MotoGP coming later here as well here on the Grid Network. But the usual triple header we've all come to know and love over years. Joe, let's wrap it up with the Coca-Cola 600.
Coca-Cola 600 wrapped up Sunday, but unfortunately we did not get the full 600 miles as rain arrived around the same time Kyle Larson arrived at the track. The concern was going into the race where essentially the early hours of Monday we'll keep racing after the rain had passed by. We'll be going past 1 a.m. So NASCAR did call the race off. Christopher Bell took the win, and essentially this is his second win of the year. Had the race continued, do you believe Christopher Bell, from what we saw in the first 300 some miles of this race, was he one of the top 3 drivers you were anticipating to win this race?
Yeah, I think he was up there. I think we saw some really solid racing, what we actually got to see last night at Charlotte. And again, it's unfortunate that we did have it called early. But yeah, I think Christopher Bell, like I said backstage before we started the show here, I think there's at least one person that's satisfied with the ending and satisfied with the decision that was made and was hoping to see the race called. And that's the guy that was actually leading the race. So, I think Christopher Bell totally deserved the win. I think he even said as much in his post-race press conference, look, I get people putting asterisks by rain-shortened races, but he drove to the front. He earned this one. It's not like he, did something similar to what Justin Haley did at Daytona all those years ago and get lucky with a lightning strike after he stayed out and, overtook everybody that came into the pits. He drove to the front. He was leading the race on merit and I think deserves the win. I think had the race restarted, would have continued to be a threat for the win. So, No asterisk on this one in my mind. Christopher Bell, deserving winner, now has 2 wins this year, like you mentioned, Joe. And I think he's somebody that you're going to have to watch, who's gotten to a championship 4 over the last couple of years. He might be a championship contender again here in 24.
Easily a championship contender. He knows how to get it done. One of the big things I feel too, especially with Christopher Bell, he was up there towards the front. I think there was a bunch of drivers, more than 3, that could go out there, get the win. The one thing we'll always be questioning, this race is known for having cars that were set up very good in the first half, but then the second half, as the track cools, it changes and they fall behind. I would have been really curious to see how that would have played out, but that's just part of the race. Unfortunately, when you don't have the ability to run all the way because of weather, whoever's out front, you're past halfway, you get the win. Christopher Bell, I say a well-deserved win. Now, we don't often talk about 13th place finishers, Ben, but in this case, it is Justin Allgaier that was finished 13th. And of course, he was driving Kyle Larson's vehicle. Kyle Larson missed the start because of the Indy 500 being delayed, the rain just playing havoc for both the Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600. So once Kyle Larson arrived, so did the rain. Unfortunately, he joins Robbie Gordon, who also attempted a double in 2000, stayed in Indy after a rain delay, and arrived late in Charlotte after the 600-mile race the Coca-Cola 600 has started. Now, Gordon got to compete in NASCAR races after leaving the Indy 500. Larson just unfortunately never had that opportunity yesterday. A lot of people, I think, were hoping the rain would lift so we could see Kyle Larson get in log laps, but he did not get to complete a single lap. Now, Ben, we talked about this quote from Kyle Larson, where essentially Kyle Larson said he felt very disappointed that he let down a lot of folks. We talked at great length about how he probably felt disappointed as a racer, but how disappointed was it overall for Kyle Larson to get all the way there, not race, but also I'll throw in this. How impressed were you with Allgaier's performance in the race?
It was very disappointing. And, again, I know we touched on this during the IndyCar portion of the show, but, I imagine he's got to be crushed. All the effort that went into trying to pull off the double here and arriving to Charlotte late and thinking that the timing might have actually worked out perfectly because they were just going red as he was getting there and they could take their time with the driver change. And, of course, they still would have had to drop to the back of the field. But knowing the talent of Kyle Larson and what he can do behind the wheel of a Cup Series car, like I said, it was shaping up for maybe Justin Allgaier to get his first career Cup Series win in a very similar manner to how Eric Almirola got his first Xfinity Series win. But, you take nothing away from Justin Allgaier. This is a 13th place finish, all on him, all on merit. And, something that, again, I don't know if Allgaier is at the point in his career where he would be interested in a full-time Cup Series seat, but it's not because of a lack of talent. What he's done in Xfinity with Junior Motorsports for the last several years, I think he's done everything but win a championship in that series. He is absolutely sensational in his own right. And to come in here with very little, if any, I think, experience in the next-gen car. I think he's filled in a couple of times here or there as well. But to come in here and not only keep the car in the lead lap, but to drive it up into the top 15 and finish there, solid day for the 5-team in the Owners' Championship, if that means anything. I know I like to follow it a little bit, but I understand that it's not on the front of everybody's mind, but it does still count all the same for the 5-team in that regard. This was a great run for him, and I think that it was a great opportunity for him to showcase his talents as well, and he had the 5-team in the best possible position they could have asked for when Kyle Larson got into that car. And again, it's unfortunate that we never restarted this race and didn't get a chance to see what Larson could have done there at the end. I would have loved to see him charge through the field those last 150 laps and see if he could make something special happen. But again, that was just kind of a story of a day for Kyle. And it was unfortunate that the weather threw a wrench into his plans for the double here. And again, I really hope that he can come back next year because I think he proved that he deserves another opportunity and another shot at this. And it's a shame that the NASCAR portion of his weekend got just as screwed up as the IndyCar portion did.
Very unfortunate for Kyle Larson. The disappointing that you got there, you're ready to race, but didn't get to. Justin Allgaier, I will say this. What an effort. He got back on the lead lap. Strong run. 13th place Been really curious to see how that car would have kept improving as the race gone on. Granted, it would have been with Kyle Larson. Easily, we'd be talking potentially of an Allgaier victory, which would have been one for the record. But he got his first win, but it was Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson got a win, but it doesn't count or show on the record books. Would have been an interesting scenario, but overall, what a performance by Justin Allgaier. And I think in his post race, well, it was during the red flag, so unfortunately, it's now the post race conference. He was talking a lot about it and brought that up, encouraged folks to find that on YouTube. Check it out. One driver, Ben, Josh Berry, top 10 finish again for Stewart-Haas Racing. And we know there's a lot of rumors of what's going to happen to that organization. In the race, Noah Gragson, who has had some strong runs, he crashed out after contact exiting turn 2, done for the day. Briscoe, 25th, Priest, 26th. Nowhere there in sight where Josh Berry, he just seems to find something extra in that 14. Now that the first half of the regular season is done, Stewart-Haas Racing on the track to win in the next 13 weeks. Do you think that's a possibility?
It could be. Just real quick, I want to circle back because I know we were talking about Mark Martin and Pato O'Ward earlier in the show. Mark just tweeted a little less than an hour ago, at Jay Allgaier did an outstanding job. Such a great person, one of the good guys. So showing some love to Allgaier as well, and deservedly so, from one driver of the 5-car at Hendrick Motorsports at one time to another, making his first and probably only starting that car. We'll see. Maybe the weather plays a role in Larson's attempt to do a double next year. You never know what's going to happen in this sport, but good to see Mark showing Justin some love on X/Twitter here as well. Stewart-Haas Racing is a very interesting team right now, Joe. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of rumors. They've made it all the way to the Fox broadcast. I know Race Day was talking about this as well. Jamie McMurray saying that, we don't know what's going to happen with that team in the future. This could be the end of the road for these current contracts that these guys are on. I'm impressed that they're doing as well as they are, to be honest with you, because I cannot imagine that the morale over at that organization right now is really high, given all the rumors and all the uncertainty going on at this race team. But Josh Berry, if he keeps running like he has been the last couple of weeks, I think, he could certainly be a contender for a race win. Maybe not at every track. He's still technically a rookie here, even though he has had a lot of experience filling in a similar role to Allgaier has here. But I think that, he is certainly proving that he belongs in the series and probably got to the series a little bit too late, just because he never got the same opportunities until he was a little bit older, racing in a late model series for so many years. Josh Berry is certainly proving that his talent has him in the right place for him in his career at this point in time. You hate it for Noah Gragson, because I think similarly, Gregson's really turned it around the last couple of weeks as well. Chase Briscoe has shown moments here or there. Ryan Preece, we know what he can do behind the wheel of a modified. I don't think it's a lack of talent on the part of this organization here. It's just a lack of Cup Series experience, coupled with the fact that there's so much uncertainty given the business aspect of those rumors that are going on right now as to the future of this team. So hopefully that doesn't play too big of a role in terms of performance for any of these 4 drivers, and we can see one, maybe 2 of them at least go to victory lane at some point this year. But it's looking more likely than it was at the start of the season, Joe. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, something else going on right now. Gragson, unfortunately, just one of those deals. He was one of the few cars not running at the end. JJ Yaley, Ryan Blaney, the other 3 cars that were out of this race. Blaney, tire blew, turned 4 wall. He was done for. And last year, he won this race, and that got him in the playoffs. He is still winless this year. Joey Logano, he won the All-Star race, but of course, regular season, playoff-wise, not locked in yet. And again, Brad Keselowski, top 4 on the track. Does Team Penske, despite they're probably celebrating the Indy 500, but at least on the NASCAR side, are they starting to get nervous about securing a playoff spot?
Cindric for sure. Logano, obviously, we talked about it on Encore a little bit last week. Could the momentum of the All-Star race, even though there are no points, there's no playoff berth on the line, could that maybe boost the morale over at Penske? I wouldn't be too concerned about Logano yet. He's a 2-time Cup champion in his own right. And it's an even year. I guess that you have to consider him a threat to go to the championship 4 if that trend's going to continue as well here. But I think that you don't have to be too concerned about Logano yet. I'm not concerned about Blaney at all. He's just looking at the standing series, the highest of those 3.
I like I said on this show a few weeks ago, I don't think we're going to get to 16 winners this year. I think we've had enough time with the next gen car that the parity's kind of come back down to earth a little bit. So I think I wouldn't put it past Blaney to win a race, but I think even if he doesn't, I think he'll be among the top drivers that doesn't have a win and can get into the playoffs that way. And Joey Logano, again, a champion's always going to find a way to get the job done. I think, there's 16 playoff spots up for grabs. I don't doubt that he can pick up one of those. But of course, Cindric, he's obviously got much less experience than his two champion teammates, but he's the one I would be most concerned about. The other two, not too concerned about Logano yet. He definitely needs to make sure that he's firing all cylinders here as we get into the second half of the regular season. But I wouldn't say I'm too concerned about Blaney at all yet. If he falls like a rock over the next few weeks, you can get back to me on that one, but not too concerned about our defending champion.
13 races, we'll find out how it all shapes up. Yesterday, 373.5 miles out of the 600 were completed, but we were seeing 3 wide racing. This aero package and the car have been so good on the 1.5 ovals. We only had 7 cautions, so the first time under 10 cautions with this car in the Coca-Cola 600. But of course, had we gone the additional miles to the end, very different story. And this was the last race of the weekend. Considering it ended under rain, did this ended the weekend on a low note?
Give Dave Blaney his Harley J. Earl trophy. That's all I've really got to say after this one. I mean, I cannot believe that we called this race, but I get it. I trust that people were out there, doing their best. And if the humidity just wasn't going to let us, I know some fans of the track took some pictures and said, hey, it's actually drying out. Who knows if it was like that all the way around the track. I wasn't there. I trust that NASCAR made that decision. But 12 years ago, we repaved the entire corner where Montoya hit that jet dryer. I'm sorry. I'm never going to get over that one. Apologies to all the Matt Kenseth fans out there. I just feel like we have been a little bit inconsistent with these calls. But yeah, I think, again, for everybody other than Christopher Bell, everybody other than the crew guys on that number 20 team and Joe Gibbs himself, I think this was absolutely a low note to end this weekend on. I think everybody wanted to see, not just what Kyle Larson could do, but like you mentioned, Joe, this 1.5 mile package has been unequivocally the best place to watch these next-gen cars race. I think everybody was looking forward to seeing how we could have gotten this race restarted and finished and see it all play out naturally. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out. And again, we can second guess those decisions all we want. There were some rumors that there was more weather in the area, more lightning strikes within the 8-mile radius. Even if there wasn't more precipitation, that obviously would have forced at least a 30-minute delay on top of that. And then, if you can factor in how much time we had left in the race, if we were going to be racing until 3 a.m., probably not the best idea in the world. But again, it is remarkably frustrating that this weekend ended the way it did, especially for Kyle Larson not being able to get the chance to get back behind the wheel of his number 5 car. But again, hopefully he can have another shot at it next year. Hopefully next year the weather cooperates and we get all 600 miles in. But yeah, as great as Indy was, a little bit of a downer that it got postponed to later in the afternoon, and then obviously a massive buzzkill there at the end. With no disrespect to Christopher Bell, who I said at the start of the segment deserved the win 100%. Very low note to end the weekend on, unfortunately.
A low note, and I feel especially since Indy 500 had the weather situation, Monaco with the red flag, that just took strategy out and was really just procession. It's not going to exactly be remembered as the greatest Memorial Day race weekend when it comes to the big 3 races. At least the Indianapolis 500 lived up to the hype. The Coca-Cola 600 was living up to the hype. It just unfortunately ended on that low note, and that was the end of the race weekend.
And a great story at Monaco. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's great to see Leclerc finally win that race. It's just, conversation we come back to all year. The racing itself in Monaco was not really racing. And that's something that we have to talk about and consider, what we can do to try to fix that every year. But, again, there were great storylines. I don't think, some people on Twitter were saying that the day was, or X, I'm sorry, were saying that the race was, a total buzzkill and completely ruined the weekend, or that the weekend as a whole was completely not worth it. I don't agree with that. I think there was some great high moments, but yeah, it was frustrating to end it on that note and not be able to get the full 600 miles in.
Yeah, very frustrating note to end it. And of course, Coca-Cola 600 that wrapped up Memorial Day weekend. But Kobe, we got to talk about 2 other races that joined the Memorial Day weekend as well too, because very early on in the morning, the first one of the morning, 5 a.m. if you're on the West Coast, we had MotoGP.
Yeah, that's right. MotoGP held the Catalunya Grand Prix, which saw Alicia Spargo start on the pole and win the sprint race, but it was a two-time defending world champion Pecco Bagnaia taking the win in the Ducati. Jorge Martin came home in second and left with a 39-point lead over Pecco. Marquez is third in the points and came home third in the Catalunya Grand Prix. Joe, do you anticipate Bagnaia, Martin, and Marquez being MotoGP's version of the Big Three this season?
It sure looks like it. I am confident that Marc Marquez is back 100%. This isn't the Marc Marquez where he tried to come back, falls out, gets hurt, out for the season. This is Marc Marquez. I'm going out there to get the wins. He's getting the podiums. Now he has to step it up, get the wins. Ducatis are looking fast. And now it seems like Ducati, they're going to start showing their muscle. And I think we're going to start seeing Ducati similar to last year and the year before. They're going to start showing their muscle and they're going to start running away with it. Pecco Bagnaia, brilliant run, made up for the mistake he did crashing out on the last lap of the sprint race. Jorge Martin, he is running a good solid race week after week. Missed out on the podium in the sprint, but got second place, maintained that points lead. He's on track, I think, for a championship. It'll be really interesting to see if he could hold that for the remainder of the season with Pecco Bagnaia.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be interesting to see how this championship battle all shapes up. And after a race, Fabio Quartararo was happy for the first time in a long time. Yamaha has been different since he won his championship in 2021. Since then, there have been a lot of growing pains, a lot of struggles for Fabio, but he still signed a contract extension with Yamaha when many thought he was leaving. Really surprised a lot of people that he's committed to Yamaha for the foreseeable future. So, and we were saying on previous show that he must know something we don't about the future development of the Yamaha bike. So do you believe that Yamaha and Quartararo can start rebuilding their season?
Potentially, it was really interesting to see that smile and everything from Fabio Quartararo, because I just thought it was going to be one of those races where, okay, you got a top 10, what could have been, but he seemed to be a lot more jazzed up. So I'm starting to think maybe they have something there. I think the big struggle is Yamaha is just them. So you only essentially have those two riders. It's got to improve for Fabio Quartararo. I think Fabio Quartararo, the fact that he's motivated, believes in them, hopefully that could translate to the team, getting a bike better and better week in and week out for that organization, because it has still just stumped me how everything has changed. Now that we know that MotoGP is going to have some changes, including getting rid of some devices, like the starting device where the bike gets much lower, some of the aerodynamics. Maybe that's playing into the hopes of Yamaha that, hey, this is our opportunity to come back when the regulations change. But overall, I think this season, if they could keep improving and getting them positions to potentially get race wins, more power to them.
Yeah, for sure. And the next race weekend for MotoGP is next week at Mugello for the Italian Grand Prix on June 2nd. It's really crazy. The month of May over just like that. So we're going to be getting into the month of June and into the summer months, which we're going to have a lot of races. June, July, August is going to be really crazy. We're going to have packed race weekends just like this one. And we had another race happening on this really busy Memorial Day weekend. That was Formula E in Shanghai.
Now, one more, and then we'll get into the grid ranking, and then we'll be done here. Thank you all for sticking with us for what probably is going to end up being close to a 2-hour show here. We have Formula E, though, to still get to, so let's do that right now. They completed their first weekend in Shanghai, China. There was a break from the Peloton racing we've been seeing as the field again spread out. Antonio Felix da Costa won his second race in the last three here. Nick Cassidy finished fourth, but eliminated more than half the field from mathematical contention in the Drivers' Championship. Only 9 drivers remain in mathematical contention, and da Costa is the 7th one of those. So still a long shot, but on a good run nonetheless. So in light of that, Kobe, 2 wins in 3 races here. Going back to Portland, where he had a podium last year, is momentum on his side. Maybe he can't win the championship in reality, but to at least continue to move up the standings here and get a strong end-of-year result.
Yeah, definitely. I think Antonio Felix da Costa can definitely keep this momentum on his side and try to move up in the standings a little bit further. But in regards to championship, I think that ship itself, I think the momentum came a little too late for Antonio Felix da Costa in that front. And plus, all the rumors about that his seat at Porsche is, up in the air. I know there was a rumor that Nico Muller, tested a Porsche, tested the Porsche Formula E car privately during the season, and as I'm sure that's something that's been weighing on Antonio Felix da Costa's mind. He could more than likely be driving for a future job in Formula E. So for him to come out and perform the way he's been performing lately is obviously gonna help his case, when he's trying to secure his next Formula E contract, if he's going to be out at Porsche. But I think Antonio Felix da Costa is doing, what we've always known him to do, to contend for wins and podiums, because he is a very good driver. I know he's had some bad luck, last few years after winning all and all that. But yeah, I think he can definitely end the year on a positive note. But the championship, he's definitely not going to be a part of that battle.
The only way Antonio Felix da Costa is going to be part of the championship bout is if somehow Nick Cassidy, Pascal Wehrlein, Mitch Evans, they all just have a big crash or something in Portland, and he manages to sweep the weekend. Antonio Felix da Costa, I'm happy that he got this win. Still mathematically eligible. So surprised that quickly we're down to just 9 racers in the championship hunt. But it is closing that window quickly. Unless Antonio Felix da Costa has everything work out for him, it's not going to happen. I think the best thing he could do is go out there, go for the race wins, try to secure as many points as possible. I think he'll still, if he's in a situation like he was in Portland last year, try to help out his teammate Pascal Wehrlein, because he knows a driver's championship for the organization will be great. And maybe, that could help him when it comes to where will he be next year. But overall, I think he just has to go out there, go for the wins, not worry about this championship picture.
Well, Nick Cassidy's main rival, Pascal Wehrlein, had a punctured tire, did not finish in the points, so Cassidy now has a 25-point lead over Wehrlein, almost a full race when bonus points are taken into consideration. Cassidy would want to leave Portland with more than 58 points ahead advantage over Wehrlein. That would wrap up the championship before London, 58 points over anybody in the championship battle, I should say. So, Joey, is that the main goal for Cassidy entering Portland, to wrap up this championship?
I would say for Nick Cassidy, probably the main goal will still just be go out there and get the win. Now, of course, 25-point win, you could easily get that goal of over 50. But I honestly feel if he has a lead of more than 30 points exiting Portland, he's going to be hard to beat as long as he finishes up towards the front. So I think he's still going to enter Portland with the mindset, run your own race. You're not trying to clinch the championship picture just yet. He's good at Portland. He got the race win last year. He doesn't really need to change it up that much. This is going to be a race where we expect the peloton. We thought it would occur in China. It didn't really happen. This is our first year. We're coming back to Portland. I think he has a clear picture of what he wants to do, translate that to the team so that way he could maximize it. But I think it's just go out there, run your own race, go for the win.
Yeah, I think the thing that Nick Cassidy just needs to do is just remain consistent and all of that. Keep finishing on the podium, and you can't finish on a podium, finish 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever. Just try to keep stacking points, and hopefully your rivals will have a bad day like Pascal Wehrlein in race 2 at Shanghai. Didn't have a good finish, ended up finishing outside of the points, and that's exactly what someone like Nick Cassidy needs to see. You need to see your rivals having championship trouble. So I think if Nick Cassidy, doesn't have any DNFs or have a bad race or he's finishing outside of the points, I think this championship is definitely his to lose. And I believe that he just needs to remain cool, calm, and collective, and just do what he's been doing all season. If he does that, he's gonna end up being champion at the end of the year.
All right, we'll leave it there. The last weekend of June, Formula E will be back in Portland, and we will be there. Well, I won't be there. Joe, you will be there. I will be there with you next week for some NASCAR and ARCA racing. Be sure you make sure to subscribe and take advantage of all our coverage from Portland International Raceway over the next month or so. Lots to look forward to. In the meantime, Kobe, let's wrap up the show with a recap of where we stand in Week 8 of the grid ranking.
Yeah, yesterday was a marathon of a day on Sunday, and our wrap-up show is becoming a marathon of a show, approaching the 2-hour mark. So I'm gonna say once again, thank you all for watching this long. Been a long weekend of racing, a lot to cover, and we're gonna end it with the grid ranking here. Week 8 of the grid ranking didn't have any league changes this weekend, but Alex Palou moves to second, and Max Verstappen is down to 5th after the 6th place finish on the streets of Monaco. We had 7 races this weekend across Formula One, Formula E, IndyCar, MotoGP, and NASCAR. So, Ben, I'm going to start with you on this one. Which races stood out the most on a busy Memorial Day weekend?
Well, it's frustrating that it got pushed to the afternoon, but I'm glad we got it in. It's obviously the Indianapolis 500. I think we saw great racing all throughout the field. A little bit of a rocky start with how many cautions we were seeing, how aggressive the drivers were, but credit to them. They got us home to the finish cleanly. No red flag controversy like we've had the last couple of years, and we got a great finish with Josef Newgarden and Pato O'Ward as the two main protagonists in that battle for the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500. A great result, a great race. And again, I think unfortunately, when you look at the other two main contenders, Monaco had a great story, but not such great racing. The Coke 600 maybe was the opposite, had some great racing, but not such a great story the way that it all played out. And unfortunate what happened with Kyle Larson not getting a chance to get in the car to even run a single lap in the second leg of the double attempt. So for me, it's the Indianapolis 500. Not to say that there weren't great storylines surrounding the rest of the weekend, but that's the one race that stood out to me the most.
Indianapolis 500. That stood out for the great racing, the stories, everything, as you pointed out, being just unfortunate, the late start. I would give second place, though, for me, the sprint race in MotoGP. That was a phenomenal sprint race. It really set up to what we thought would be a great Catalunya Grand Prix. That didn't exactly deliver, but that sprint race, that was a great start. I felt overall when it came to the racing, the stories, it varied where everyone had great storylines from championship battles in Formula E, Leclerc breaking the curse, NASCAR just unfortunate ended, and then Indianapolis 500 unfortunately start late, delayed, caution after caution, but that finish, everyone's going to be talking about the finish as this being one of the best Indy 500s. It finished pretty late for the Indy 500 standards, but overall, it left the fans happy, and I think it really is going to stand out for a long time to come, at least the 2024 Indianapolis 500.
Yeah, I definitely think the Indy 500 stands at the very top of all the races we saw this weekend. It was just an incredible race, and like you mentioned, how it was really questionable at the start. With all the crashes that we were seeing, and since we had the curfew of 8:15. We're wondering, if we were going to have enough time to get the race in all 500 miles, all 200 laps before we had to call it quits for the day. But we got the race in, saw a wonderful show, saw a lot of great racing all throughout the field, lots of bold moves, a lot of sketchy moves. Drivers just holding on for dear life. And I don't know if you guys saw this on the final lap, but when Josef Newgarden swung around the outside around Pato O'Ward, Pato watched up the hill, looked like he was going to crash when Newgarden went around him. I didn't really see a lot of people talking about that. It was just a really great race. Definitely one of my favorite Indy 500s. It seems like every single year now we're always saying that this Indy 500 is the best one I've ever seen. And I'm sure next year we'll be saying the same thing, that next year's Indy 500 be the best one we've ever seen. It just seems like it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. Kobe, not too much more to add there. I still rank 2011 as my personal favorite, just with all the storylines that surround that one, but absolutely fantastic 500 once again this year. And we'll see if we can come back next year and have something similar happen once again. But in the meantime, let's keep it with the theme of the high note here. Joe, I know we'll give you the entire weekend's worth of 5 races to choose from, I guess, here. But what was your one shining moment that stood out to you most this weekend?
I say my one shining moment from this weekend, it's hard to beat, but I gotta say, for me at least, it stood out as the shining moment. That was a phenomenal interview Pato O'Ward had, where he really showed the true, I think, emotions of what this race means. In the past, I feel like when it comes to, drivers hiding their emotions, just being that professional, corporate image, when it comes to, oh, you're a man, you don't want to be seen crying. We're now in an era where it's all right to show your true emotions because the fans, they're going to rally behind you. It makes for great stories for people to talk about. The agony of defeat, and Pat was at full display of that. I know he probably wished we were not talking about him crying and, being so upset. He wished we were talking about him winning this race. But I think it comes to the point of this. This race, it meant so much for him. He put it on full display, and I think he earned a lot of respect from so many fans. We saw how Mark Martin recognized that. So many people, I think, gained a lot of appreciation for him. And I think at the end of the day, Paddle Award just showing his true emotions and that, hey, this means so much. I'm not going to hide it. I'm just going to be open and honest. Gain a lot of respect from a lot of people. That is my Shiny Moment Paddle Award.
Yeah, and Paddle Award already has a very large fan base, as we touched on in past episodes. And I think his fan base has got even bigger after that. And Paddle was been very emotional. If you heard in the background, the fans were chanting Paddle, Paddle. And this was after, Josef Newgarden had won the race, out there celebrating with the fans. You still had some fans paying their respects to Paddle, really appreciating the drive that he had put in and seeing how much this really meant to him. And I'm going to give my shining moment to a different Aero McLaren driver, probably one that you'd expect, but I gotta give a call to Callum Milot, who ended up finishing 11th. As you saw at the beginning of the race, it looked like Callum Milot, was his race was going to be over at the very beginning because he had some issues on pit road to change the steering wheel, and then when the rows of three were coming up to take the start, his slot was missing. And then I was thinking, wow, this is just like Graham Rahal 1 year ago when Graham's race was ruined at the very beginning because he had a mechanical issue. But luckily, Ilott was able to get up to speed and drove through the field, ended up getting a very good finish, 11th place. And Callum was saying earlier in the week, that since Teo Pourchaire is going to be in that number 6 car for the rest of the season, Ilott doesn't have any more scheduled IndyCar races here, just his sports car schedule in the World Endurance Championship. So he was saying that this is going to be my last IndyCar race for a long time, or since he doesn't have anything right now, it could be his last IndyCar race of his career. I still find that hard to believe given how talented he is. That is his last IndyCar race forever. But it just shows you, that despite the frustrating start, he left it all out on the track. And if this is his last IndyCar race, I think he went out on a good note.
It's hard to pick, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to give a quick one from all of our 3 major races here, the greatest day of racing. Congratulations to Charles Leclerc. I think, regardless of what you think of the Monaco Grand Prix, it's a great story for him to finally check that off his list. I guess we'll go with a McLaren theme here. I want to give a shining moment to Alexander Rossi. I know he's on a winless streak of his own, looking for some positive momentum to try to get back on the right track and look like the Alexander Rossi of old. And I think we saw that yesterday. It's unfortunate, but he had to save fuel there at the end. I would have liked to have seen if he could have been in contention for the battle for the win a little bit longer, but still a solid 4th place result nonetheless. We'll see if he can take that momentum and apply it to the rest of the season here. And then not a McLaren driver, but he has that papaya orange on the car because of that paint scheme that they were running for Larson this weekend. I want to give a call to Justin Allgaier again. A great result for him on such short notice, such unexpected notice, just kind of thinking he was there as an emergency scenario should Larson get caught in traffic or whatever the case may be. And then you have the weather change those plans, and he gets word that he's going to actually start the race, runs nearly 400 miles and comes away with a solid top 15 run in 13th place. Great result for him. And again, I think somebody that is proof that there is top talent, not just in the Cup Series in NASCAR, but also in Xfinity and trucks as well. Allgaier had a great run, and those are my shining moments from our greatest day of the year in motorsports yesterday.
Great day in motorsports. One we're going to be talking about for a long time, especially that Indy 500 start. And we're still going to be talking more about racing later today with Grid Encore. So be sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss Ben on the air later today. And of course, a big thank you to our Patreon investors on the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. Links in the video description to our Patreon, as well as Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat if you're watching us live, or hit the thanks button. We'll thank you the next time we're on the air, which will be later today with Ben, then Kobe on Wednesday with Grid Tonight, and then the big special weekend, our Grid Life coverage. Plus, we're going to be at Portland for the Xfinity Series race weekend. For Ben and Kobe, I'm Joe. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day and enjoy your Monday.